Hello and welcome to Creator Spotlight number 2. This one is on artist writer Sean Gordon Murphy. Here we're going to look at the work of one writer and discuss some of the highlights from his work. This is Matt, and I'm joined by my pal Noah.
Hey there.
So, Noah, why don't you lead us off with some initial thoughts on Sean's art?
So Sean Murphy's artwork is what got me back into reading more than like one monthly comic.
Mm-hmm.
I remember just when Tokyo Ghost was coming back, I saw an ad for it on Facebook, and I was like, I need to get into that series, whatever it is, because that looks amazing.
Mm-hmm.
And I was really into Akira at the time, and it had that cool bike that looked like it was from Akira. So I wanted to go pick up that issue of whatever it was, if it was like number one or whatever. So I went to about that time, my local comic book store was Third Eye Comics. And I went there and I got the number one. And I was just like fell in love with Sean Murphy's style. And the people there at Third Eye are so great that they're like, if you like that, you should check out all of this. And like literally the next week I was back there and I was like, I want more of his work. So I picked up Punk Rock Jesus and The Wake and read both of those just really fast, ate it up. I love his style. It's so kinetic. It's so textured. And it's, I like to say Sean Murphy's fingerprints are literally and figuratively all over his artwork. And it's just the most rewarding experience to look at his books because you can see and get a great experience out of just seeing the artwork. But then you can also there's almost this like sensory experience seeing all the lines and the texture of his artwork that it's like looking at a Jackson Pollock painting or like the Jackson Pollock equivalent in a comic book where it actually makes sense, but it's all about like line and texture almost to the point where like his shadows are almost expressionistic and not necessarily like formalistic, you know?
Mm-hmm.
It's just beautiful line work that like sometimes doesn't make sense, but it doesn't matter if it doesn't make sense. It just looks really good and it feels good. So that's what I think of Sean Murphy. What do you think?
Yeah, so for me, when I got back into comics, I was just looking for different things, names that I recognized, names that I heard on podcasts. And so there was a lot of talk about Grant Morrison on a lot of podcasts. So I saw that a new Grant Morrison book was coming out from Vertigo, and that was Joe the Barbarian.
Yeah,
So
awesome
I bought that not knowing Sean Gordon Murphy's work at the time, and I was just sort of mesmerized. There was the all the toys, the rats in the armor fighting. It was just like I was like from there. I was like when I saw that I was like I'm really into this art, and to this day I've probably bought everything that he's drawn. So
Yeah, I mean, I've even bought variant covers that he did. I think he did a Batman annual a couple of
mhm.
years back. He just did the cover for it, and I bought it because it was his artwork on it. I love anything that he draws. I've met him twice. He's a really nice guy.
Mhm.
When I met him both times, my wife, I introduced him to Rebecca, who's been on the show several times.
Mhm.
She really loved Scott Snyder, so I introduced her to The Wake, and then she like loved Sean Murphy's artwork from that. So I bought the Hellblazer book, and she was a fan of Constantine, the character. She loved that book by his run on Hellblazer. It was awesome. And then we both met him a second time, and Rebecca got to get the Hellblazer book personalized by him, and it was a great experience. So love his artwork. He's a nice guy.
Yeah.
Love his art rep. Well, I can't remember his name, but it's a cool guy to meet at conventions.
Do you think his art rep's name is Jeff? I'm
Yes.
pulling a name out of my head right there. And
Yep. Jeff is
Jeff.
awesome.
Yeah.
Jeff, I think he's from Essential Sequential, and he's great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I called up his comic book DB right here, and so we can see a little bit of the stuff that he's worked on. He's got some writer credits at the top, but as we would suspect, a lot of these credits are as a penciler and an inker. So is there one title you wanna start off with, or do you want to maybe look at these in chronological order a little bit?
I don't know much about off-road, but I would like to start about talking about that because you know off-road and you own original art from off-road.
Oh, that is. Yeah, I own 2 pages from Off Road. All right, comic book DB, you're not you're not happy with us right now. Yeah, I own 2 pages from Off Road, which is a sort of a coming home story of 2 kids, or actually three kids that um, have a Jeep, and the Jeep gets stuck on the way to the party, and it's let's see, it's almost like American Pie, um, meets like a car chase, if that's the best description. And I would like to have other original art, but those were the ones that I was able to get, and those are some of my favorite pieces. So
Yeah, that book is you can definitely see it's his older style, which is a lot more minimalistic and a
yeah.
little more smooth and not as textured, but you can see sort of that his style coming out of that with how sketchy the lines became and like more speed lines started coming out of it. And of course, his main subject came out of that series of what he's known for now, and that's the guy who draws cars the
Mhm.
best. So yeah, that's um, yeah, I've always wanted to read it. I've just seen artwork from it, and you can definitely start to see maybe who his biggest influences were at the time in that book. Like you can see he's like admittedly sort of comes from the school of like Mignola mixed with some manga influences in there, and you can see that in Off Road pretty plainly with how like sometimes how deep and dark and black the silhouettes are, but then it's sometimes how expressive the characters are, like a manga story, and
Mhm.
how like nothing's ever shot, nothing's ever like straight on. It's all very like very dynamic in the angles, so it's pretty great. So it's a great work to just look at the artwork for.
Yeah, I think, and also you could probably see some of the development of the way he draws faces.
Yes, definitely. Yeah. And you can definitely, that's something I was learning today as I was looking across all the work that I have from him. And probably the oldest I have from him is his his first book, his first Hellblazer book with
Hmm.
where I think where Jason Aaron was writing for him.
Oh wow.
2 page, it's just a 2 issue Hellblazer story, and it's awesome. But you can see it has everything in it except for car chases, but it has like the really like high contrast but lots of lines. But it's also got a like a punk subplot, like a punk rock subplot, so it's very Sean Murphy still. But I realized reading that to like even looking at White Knight stuff, his way of drawing faces has never changed, in
Hmm.
that all the guys faces look like him and all the women's faces just look the same as well. But
Definitely.
he has these uniform ways like every artist does. But that's you don't go to an artist just to see the you know you don't mind when it's just the same face over and over again. But
Speaking of all the guys looking at like him, I
yeah,
called up a under the hood page where
right.
he's drawn himself into the book. Um, so is there something that you want to touch on next, or is there an image that really calls to you that you want to look at?
Nothing really calls to me that I want to talk about, unless you have some off-road art you want to talk about. But um, I'd love to just jump right into Punk Rock Jesus,
Yeah, that's
just
what.
because that was my first completed graphic novel that I ever read by him.
Yeah, that's actually the way that's actually what I was thinking as well. So let's go into to Punk Rock Jesus.
Sounds awesome.
Yeah, so I think also this was the first book that he wrote and drew. So
That's a big deal. And
yeah.
it's his style, like, realized
Hmm.
right here now for like the whole, is it 10 issues, I think.
It's
Um
yeah, it's either 10 or 12. Yeah.
yeah. It's an amazing book. Um and it's very well paced. I would say that, like, Murphy, where he like doesn't, like, where he is not probably as good with dialogue, he's really good with like pacing and of course artwork. So we should probably just do a whole episode where we break down the whole book, but like, I think for the sake of brevity, we can just talk about the artwork for Punk Rock Jesus. And it's amazing across the board. To see like his uses of wash,
Hmm.
uh, cross hatching, but also like screen tones, just how he like integrates those different things. It's also one of those books where like how he integrates action sequences into the story. If you read the synopsis, you don't think, wow, that's not going to be a very action heavy book, but it's a very action heavy book with a lot of car chases, a lot of fist fights, a lot of hand to hand combat. It's a lot of shootouts. It's a pretty intense book, but it doesn't feel out of place when it's in there. And I have to give that to him as far as plotting goes, that he makes the story flow really well through artwork, but also through just pacing in general, knowing when a splash page is needed, knowing when when like a page needs to be designed around a bigger image, and not so many panels. um there's a conceit of artists who are also writers to either not write very much dialogue.
Hmm.
You have your Frank Millers and like Sin City, where it's very brief and it's very like to the point. And then, like, I recently read Liam Sharp's series where he did The Brave and the Bold with Batman and Wonder Woman, and that book is very text heavy. So artists seem to be either in those two boats where they're like either no dialogue, no script whatsoever at all, like just very brief lines of dialogue, or it's just really heavy. And I have to say, Sean Murphy does a good job of not crowding his artwork with dialogue bubbles. Like,
Hmm.
there's a real knowledge of where, like, okay, dialogue bubble is going to go here for when the letterer gets to the work.
Yeah. And like so I really enjoyed Punk Rock Jesus. I mean, the art was amazing. It was a combination of like this really high concept overall story with like a personal story going on underneath of it. And I called up one of my favorite images here, the I'm drawing a blank on this guy's name. I think maybe his nickname
Thomas.
was, but was his nickname like the Graveyard or something like that, where
Yeah.
like all these crosses on his back symbolizes people that he's taken out. So
Yeah. And the weapons in this book are, he's holding there is like a mesh between like the Blade Runner gun
mhm.
and other firearms. And throughout the book, there are like all these like video game and movie firearms that Thomas uses, and it's sort of a cool little Easter egg hidden throughout Punk Rock Jesus.
Yeah, and on this image we have two motorcycles. We have one that's pretty traditional, and then we have one that's sort of a little bit more specialized. So
Yeah.
very 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 cool designs there.
Yeah, he's great with cars and motorcycles, and he does that cool effect where the motorcycles are sunken into the ground so that the vehicles themselves have the weight. And he talks about that in his off-road book.
Hmm. Yeah, and
Under the Hood book, I mean.
and he also does a lot where like and he's done a lot of like YouTube videos, or people have posted YouTube videos where he shows like the wheels are really like tucked in and like conveying the motions of the cars and stuff, and that's really cool.
Yeah, he has a great. Yeah, Under the Hood is a great book about how to draw cars. Is basically what it is, and I'd love to see his. I think maybe in the end he talks about like maybe next one's going to be how to draw motorcycles or something like that. I can't remember.
Very cool.
Yeah, very cool.
So let's go on the Tokyo Ghost.
Yeah. Yeah, this is my personal favorite grouping of Sean Murphy art. Um, I think mixed with Rick Remender's phenomenal script, I think
Hmm.
this is probably his best work. And then Matt Hollingsworth's colors are just like amazing. Um, I'll pull up some artwork for this. You can keep it while I find it. You can
Okay.
you can pull up some, but there's some great artwork in there. What's your opinion on Tokyo Ghost?
No, I really enjoyed it. You know, when I was told that there was going to be a Remender Sean Gordon Murphy book, I was pretty excited. I think the only thing that would get me more excited would be a Hickman Sean Gordon Murphy book. So fingers crossed, maybe that happens someday. But
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, here again we have another motorcycle, and another unique design. Um, just it looks like it's going so fast down the road. There's so many motion lines. The perspective it looks like it's speeding at us, and then stuff like that. It's all just so cool.
Yeah, I love the that's one of the opening images on the book, and that was what sold me on the series originally. And I just, if you want to look at my first issue of Tokyo Ghost, it'll shock you to death, Matt, because it's so not cared for whatsoever. If you can see how like
Oh wow.
how beat up it is and
Uh,
everything, that's just because of how much I read. I just poured through this book so much when I first got it. I just looked through it over and over and over again, and it's this first issue especially when it's like that's on page one, that's page 2 and 3, like
okay.
that splash that you just pulled up, and that's amazing that was in the first one, and that was what like got me like holy crap, like this is a book I want to get into. And then like a couple of pages later, you get like this right here, where it's like, this incredible race sequence. And
Definitely.
then issues later, you get like amazingly choreographed samurai battles. It's just such a great series. Um, yeah, it's so awesome.
No,
Yeah,
it's
here's a great samurai landing right there.
yeah,
You
it's
can see
very
it. Very
nice.
cool.
Yeah, definitely. One
Yeah.
one one of my favorites. So I don't know if you can see the image I brought up here, but you had mentioned earlier that the ladies all kind of look alike, and I think here's a good example. And I'm
Yeah.
not I'm not complaining about them all looking alike, but that's definitely a type. Let's look right here. This is Montoya and White Knight. Um, I guess there's some
There's
good
a
variants there.
yeah.
The jaw's a little bit more angular on Montoya, but still just great art.
Well, I remember what I talked with the guys at Third Eye. The big thing they talked about is that like they were, when they picked up Tokyo Ghost when it came out, was they were like Led, the main character, looks a lot like Thomas from Punk Rock Jesus.
Oh
And
yeah.
then now in turn, Bruce Wayne in White Knight looks a lot like those two characters as well. So the two main, like he has a type of like heroes in
Hmm.
his books, like yeah, Led, Punk Rock Jesus, and then Bruce Wayne, how he drew Bruce Wayne / Batman. And that is like pretty incredible. Here's the panel that I'm talking about that's like incredibly beautiful. If you can see that right there, I'm gonna try not to get a glare. But like how beautiful that is with like Matt Hollingsworth's colors and like the flows of the lines where he uses ink wash and everything.
Hmm.
Just beautiful. I couldn't find it on Google, but it's just such a beautiful such a beautiful thing. And then this is issue 3. So the final splash double page spread on that is also just glorious. I recommend anyone who watches that just to buy number 3 if you're going to buy any issue, and just look at the artwork in that one. It's not very action heavy in that issue. It's a lot of expository
Hmm.
dialogue, but and exploring the new world of Tokyo. But Sean Murphy's art and Matt Hollingsworth's colors and Remender's script all in this issue are just on point. It's just a great issue to get. It's a great it's just a great issue.
Yeah. So just to sort of transition us, I brought up some White Knight art, and I think this goes to your point pretty well. I mean, you look at Batman right there; that could very easily be led from Tokyo Ghost. He's not the mask isn't as full, but it that could very easily be the same structure of Hero, like you were saying earlier.
Yeah, and on this page you can also see the fingerprint technique that Murphy does. If you look at the
right
bit of shading right there, you can see how Murphy uses his everything to his advantage, and that's including his fingerprint to make tone lines on the side of his face. He uses that a lot throughout his work, and it's a great signature of a Murphy drawing where you can see the fingerprints all over that he uses, and it's just, it's him using all the tools that he has available. I know he mostly uses a brush to get those thin lines and everything, and but he uses whatever he can, like including his hands, and he does he works with the smears and the dots and everything like that, and it just sort of it wouldn't be a Sean Murphy piece without any of that.
Yeah, and he definitely loves angular faces. So this Joker is just perfect for him to do.
And that character is very reminiscent of the villain. How he draws the Joker in White Knight is very reminiscent of how the main villain in Tokyo Ghost as well. Who is kind of a Joker villain in Tokyo. The villain in Tokyo Ghost is very Joker-like.
Yeah, that's a very good point. This was a big, development in the White Knight, the development of the Neo Joker, which was one of the two Harley Quinns, which was in the book. So
I think that might be something. I remember going to comic shops and that all being all people wanted to talk about were the two Harleys, and even across like podcasts and stuff like that, people are just like, that's like the greatest idea ever. So that might be something like the Killing Joke that becomes canon in time with the two Harleys. I can't imagine it not being that.
So I think this would be good for us to discuss. This is one where he's shown the way that he's trying to lead the eye.
Very famous image. Yeah.
Yeah. So, we have a tunnel in the top panel here. We're being led into the tunnel, and then we sort of have this sort of S pattern, which looks like it's on the final panel taking us to a door. And he, some of his most famous is not the right word, but some of his most like retweeted or liked images is when he does show people with the arrows how he's going about leading the eye around the page, and that's one of our favorite things to look at.
Yeah, and I would say, and I think I'm gonna get a lot of flack for this, but I don't think the composition works the way that he thinks it does on that page. I would say that that first panel is sort of what messes it up, because he even brings it up in like the video that I always reference, and that's the 70-30 rule. So if you have like a white page and you draw a black dot, your eye's going to be drawn to that black dot, or the 75-25 rule or wherever he says. Yeah, like, so right there, you just want to look at like the one without the lines on it. I feel like that first panel, all the guiding lines on it are drawing your eye towards that black point. And it's a good composition, but all that I am drawn towards right there is that black point. Like, I don't feel my eye moving back towards that bottom panel, towards that next white light as much. If I'm reading this left to right with how black it is on the left and how black it is on the right, I'm drawn mostly to that black point that's like highlighted in the white. more than my eyes all of a sudden, like from that black point leading out. It's sort of like a black hole compositionally where my eye is just right there. And I don't feel like my eye moves around the page like those guiding lines do. I would say that it maybe moves around in other ways, like, but I would say that maybe it's not as clear that it's leading you into the next panel as it could have been, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I'm looking at it right now, and so as we've been discussing this, I'm wondering if, and I'm certainly not one to question.
Yeah, neither am I, but
decision.
I don't think I don't think that arrow leading out from the hole is there.
So what I'm thinking here is, would this work better or possibly work better if this opening here on the second panel was like in this area here? Because then you would go here, 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 and then you do have a fourth door. So like you could have lined up all the doors sort of on this like 2/3 of the way over to the right, like, or just at least this panel 2, this door or this opening here. If this was generally kind of like in this area, I feel like that would have maybe worked a little bit smoother, but that's just my opinion.
Yeah, I wonder if it would too, or if he had just centered the page and just had the entrances, all three ways. I can't remember this page on the issue if there's a lot of dialogue in those negative spaces.
Yeah,
it looks like that's definitely what he's setting it up for, is so that the letterer has room to put in the dialogue boxes, which is really great. And it's still a good composition. But I don't see, because mainly also, if you look at that third panel and how that rock up there on that third panel leads into that that first white spot on the right side of the page. I'm not seeing this swiggly line as much as I am just seeing almost like a box, 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 that kind of thing. And I'm not seeing the smoothness, mainly because of all the focal points being so far back in each image, particularly in panel 1, and then again in panel 1, 2, 3, on panel 4. So, and then also in panel 5 where it's that black dot. I don't like. I like how he did. Like he tries to show us the composition here, but I think there are other pages that he's done where he does it better.
Yeah. So, all right, let's look through a couple more.
Like that one.
Yeah.
That's beautiful.
Yeah. So we have sort of 3 inset panels. Where I'm sure these characters are dialoguing. Then we have a small panel, with the cable shooting, which actually points to the hand here. The 2 legs are pointing us down to the bottom of the page where we're going to turn the page. But I mean, just all this detail back here, these bridges, these roads, the building, sort of and all these buildings are sort of leading us to this bottom corner where we're going to think about making that page turn.
And I would say in White Knight that it's just a real pleasure to see him draw cities in Gotham City, particularly. It's just a treat to like look at this page. Again, like I said earlier, I don't know how light works sometimes in his pages at all, that kind of thing, but like it just looks good, like there's no arguing that like this is just really nice to look at right here. I don't understand how that one building on the left side of the page is covered in shadow when there's clearly a light source coming down this way. And none of this is covered in shadow down here. But again, it just looks good.
Oh
that
no.
kind of thing where it's like I'm like I like I don't yeah, it's just a good looking page.
Yeah.
He's just a good, he's like I said, he's like almost like an expressionistic inker almost.
Mhm.
Yeah.
There's a cover.
Beautiful. I also, that's another thing too with his covers is that like he's a guy that does like crowding the page really well,
Hmm.
but he also does minimalism really well too, especially in his covers like for White Knight and Tokyo Ghost. Like I love that composition that he has on those covers. That's an awesome shot right there.
Yeah, and this is, this is, I'm sure, was a lot of fun for him to draw. I mean, we have almost every Batmobile known to us drawn here.
Oh yeah, and his new Batmobile is just radical. It's so cool looking. Um, so glad he was able to design his own Batmobile.
Yeah.
I was glad he's able to design his own Batman costume because even then I really enjoyed that costume. Like it's so Sean Murphy. It's awesome.
Hmm. All
Love
right.
that. Like love that page, that cover right there, the White Knight with the Joker. Love that. Like the light bleeding down onto Batman. Same with that one as well.
And then looks
Oh,
like,
that's a great splash.
yeah. All right. And there's we saw a little bit of that earlier. So let's see. We've talked about, I think, maybe what most people would agree are his main three works.
Yeah, definitely his seminal works.
So, and here's you discussed how he got to design his own Batmobile, which we see here.
Yeah, it is awesome.
Hmm.
I love that thing. I love that page is a really well composed page. That's a splash, I think, probably double page spread.
Hmm.
Um, or maybe it's just half of one. I don't know.
Yeah.
That's a really well drawn page. Like I said, like he doesn't like, he like what little composition he does leads your eye around because it's just a joy to look at all his artwork. You know, it doesn't
Yeah.
matter that he's like, he's not like Dave Gibbons composition wise, where like a Dave Gibbons page is just like so easy to follow along and stuff like that. But he's also Dave Gibbons is so minimal with his details. Or even someone like Mike Mignola, who's like very minimal, but like his composition is so strong. But like with Murphy, it just looks cool,
No, it does.
that kind of thing. Like he just knows how to draw and he knows how to make your eye go around just because of how cool each panel is drawn, but and also how cool each car is driven in each of his comics as well. So
Yeah, and just sort of a callback to something you had mentioned earlier. You had said that like you were really into like Akira.
yeah,
And I'm reading one of the later volumes of Akira right now, and sometimes the motion lines in Akira they don't make sense.
right,
But in like here, like these motion lines really don't make a lot of sense, like on the road here, but they still convey the sense of this car is moving and coming at us. Like these are all like over here away from
yeah.
the car. Like traditionally they would be like behind the car, sort of like showing that movement. But here they're just sort of uh, you know on the road and conveying that sense of motion to us. And that's I think that goes to your manga Akira points there.
Yeah, it's so much more expression and it's almost abstract, but at the same time it gets the idea across that he's trying to convey and it
Mhm.
works. So it's awesome.
And we
Love that
discussed,
page.
yeah, we discussed this earlier. um, I have a print of this.
Same here.
I really like that image. um, just
Yep,
sort of
there's yeah.
just sort of like the weight of him leaning on the glass and her floating there. It's just great.
So much emotion and feeling put into this piece. That was one where he was selling these prints, probably where you got it at AwesomeCon in
Yeah.
2018. And my wife Rebecca and I went up when my wife got the Hellblazer book signed by him, and we were trying to decide on some prints to get from him there. And she pointed right there at the Mr. Freeze one, and she was like, "We need that one right there." And I was like, "I agree." So we both like, yeah, we had to get that piece because it's just so beautiful, it's so raw emotionally. I think that's probably one of the better things that's done well story wise in White Knight is the Mr. Freeze storyline.
Yeah, and a lot of the stuff we've been looking at earlier was a lot of black and white inks, and this is Matt Hollingsworth on colors, which he works with a lot. And like we've talked about this in the past, but like you feel the coldness from the coloring here. The blue of the glass case, the frost coming off of him. We can tell that they're in a sort of sub basement. It's very dark. It's very cold, and you can do a lot of that with the pen and the ink. But this is here, the color is sort of amping that up.
Yeah, Hollingsworth and Murphy. There's no better pairing. They worked on like I think they've worked with each other since probably The Wake.
Seems about right. Yeah.
Yeah. I think maybe Dave Stewart did the work on Joe the Barbarian, but let me check really quick. Yeah, Dave Stewart did that, and he also did the work on his Hellblazer stuff. But Hollingsworth, yeah, when they've worked from The Wake, Tokyo Ghost, White Knight, just amazing work all across the board. Hollingsworth really knows how to work with Murphy's lines.
Yeah.
And also work with the light sources that Murphy provides him with, which is a challenge. And he makes it work, which is great.
So here we have another image from White Knight. This is cool. This poster in the background.
Yeah, the animated series one. Yeah.
We get again, we get sort of the atmosphere, the twilight, the light. Let's look at this one. So this is a very cool image. But when I read White Knight, I had a question when I read this. So when they put Batman in jail, they let him keep his costume on. They don't.
Yeah.
They don't take his cape and he's not wearing his cape, but he's got his cowl on. They let him wear his mask. So I mean, it's well,
they also let Joker off so easy, and they're like, "Well, we never had any proof that he did any of that." What are you talking about? So like that. There's this this was a good segue into Sean Gordon Murphy, the punk comic book artist, where like when you think of what Sean Murphy, I think that was him playing with expectations of what you'd expect from him in a Batman book. Mm-hmm. That like there's this meta-ness, I guess you could say, to a Batman book where it's like it's not so much a straightforward Batman story as it is like a critique of Batman. Mm-hmm. But even then, once you get to the end of it, you're kind of like confused at times, that kind of thing. You're trying to figure out are you approaching Batman as Batman the idea, not so much Batman the character? And I think that's sort of what the point is, Mm-hmm. It's more Clockwork Orange than it is like The Dark Knight, I guess you could say. Where it's like so much of it isn't like, Alex in Clockwork Orange isn't so much a character as he is a representation of, I don't know, violence, Mm-hmm. And I think that's sort of maybe what Murphy was going for with White Knight. So that's how I interpreted it. But he's a punk, so I don't know how to interpret anything that he does. So, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I like one of the biggest element was like sort of like flipping everybody, You
But that only lasts for so long in the series.
no, that's true. I mean,
Yeah.
it was, it was like, I mean, one of the elements is that, when you read a Batman book, Batman's the good guy, the Joker's the bad guy, and like you said earlier, it doesn't last the whole way through, but that flips it a little bit, which is a little bit of that punk aesthetic, but
Yeah.
not not fully.
When I read White Knight versus like when I read punk rock, both I was like, I love punk rock because it's just balls to the wall,
Hmm.
Sean Gordon Murphy across the board. Like it was a perfect immersive experience into his artwork where you get everything from him.
Hmm.
Like you get him doing hand-to-hand combat, you get him doing shootouts, you get him doing really dynamic like dialogue scenes, but also like them with the car chase or motorcycle chase thrown in there. You get these like wild ideas and this like architecture that's like out of like a mix of Akira and Blade Runner and things like that. And you know he tells a story with a compelling idea with like this really strong future art style. And it's just it's just nonstop. Like there's no down moment. With also these, again, you mentioned like the concert scenes where it's just incredible. Whereas I found White Knight was really subdued, but there were like times where you could tell he wanted to go crazy. Like,
Hmm.
like he wanted to be smart with it. Like he wanted to tell a story, but like he couldn't fight the like, I really want to draw the Batmobiles like going against each other and stuff like that. Like
Hmm.
that's my overall interpretation of White Knight is like Sean Murphy trying to be brainy, trying to tell this like deep like an analysis story of Batman, but then being like, but I really want to show Batman driving cars and beating up guys, even though that goes against the like criticism I have of him. If that makes any sense.
So let me ask you a question. How much do you think that might have been the difference between a Vertigo book and a DC book? Like, there's
Yeah.
probably less editorial oversight and, an independent, well, not independent, but like a standalone Vertigo story, even though this is not in continuity Batman. Um, there was probably somebody, along the way going, hey, this is great, but let's tone this back a little bit or something like that. So there could have been a little bit of that.
Yeah, I think there is a little bit of that. Definitely. I think also from what I can tell from interviews and things like that, this isn't an idea for Batman that had been like simmering in his mind for very long.
Hmm.
Unlike Punk Rock Jesus, where you can tell that book is very thought out, like you could tell that like despite maybe even that book being inconsistent at times, you can tell like this was a passion project for him.
Hmm.
And there is some of that in White Knight where you can tell he's always passionate about whatever he's drawing.
Definitely.
Like he never goes like anything but 110% on whatever he's drawing, and then somehow is able to turn in like monthly deadlines, like on Tokyo Ghost and White Knight, which are the two series that I followed issue by issue. Like there was no breaks ever,
Hmm.
you know and on Tokyo Ghost they never had to bring in another artist to fill in for him. Like he got it all done on a month by month basis, so that by like they got all 10 issues done within a year with like a month break in between the two arcs, which is amazing.
Hmm.
And White Knight, he never missed anything there either. Like he did all 8 issues in 8 months, and it was incredible. So that like so okay, now I'm done. Now I'm done complimenting him. uh I think White Knight definitely shows that maybe it wasn't as well thought out with how much downtime there is in the comic. You know, with like there's like a lot of times where it's just a bunch of people sitting around and talking, and maybe ideas that were like sort of like supposed to go somewhere, like they make a big deal about, but then it's like summed up like the answer to in like one dialogue balloon later on. You know,
Hmm.
particularly like the Waynes being Nazis or whatever it is,
Yeah.
like Nazi fraternizers. And then that's like summed up in like one paragraph later, like, oh no, they weren't. And it's like, oh, okay. That kind of thing where it's like, there's this like lack of focus in White Knight. But I also think maybe like this is a theory, like an artist theory, where he's sort of trying to break away, like to prove himself as a writer and not so much the guy who's just really good at drawing car chase scenes, you know, which he's not just like, I mean, like for people who really appreciate his artwork, we know he's not just that. He's a really good storyteller. But I'm wondering if there wasn't something like that where he was trying to tell a more brainy story. And then like maybe towards the end kind of realized like, I kind of really just didn't like drawing the Batmobile, you know? And so the last several issues are just like an awesome car chase scene. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. I know like sometimes I'm just going to speak as somebody who wants to be a writer. Like when you first go into a story, you're very excited. All the possibilities are there. And then all of a sudden you realize, oh, I got to tie this up, and you do sometimes like rush to put everything together. Now I do agree with you. The Waynes being Nazis, that was the thing. I was like, hey, what's going on here? This is a big development. We need to figure out what's going on here. And it was just sort of like, okay, this is done with. We're going to go. And Alfred left a note in the floor that's going to explain everything.
Exactly. And it's just,
just
brushed to the side really fast.
Yeah.
And then like, you know, I think there's this like, I think White Knight is probably not nearly as strong as punk rock as far as like how well written it is, but it's still just beautiful all across the board. Like, you know, we wanted Sean Murphy to draw Batman and we weren't disappointed with what he gave us.
Agreed. All right. Do you have anything you want to bring up for everybody to look at, or do you want to bring this to a close?
I mean, I'll just recommend things. I won't bring it up, actually. Okay. I'll just recommend some maybe of his lesser-known work, and that's his he did a short Christopher Nolan wrote a short comic that was a prequel to Interstellar, and Sean Murphy did the artwork for it, and it was just in this like I think maybe it was in some special effects magazine, or even like
it was in Wired magazine.
Wired, yeah. And the artwork for that is amazing. And again, like that's where it's like he's a good storyteller and a good artist, and not just the guy who's good at drawing cars, because that comic for me was like what cemented him as like just awesome. And he did a great job with that short comic, and it's my goal in life to get some of the original artwork just from that comic, that short Interstellar book.
Oh yeah, it's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Okay, I should. I agree with you there. So I think we've done a pretty good analysis. I think it's very easy to say that we're both huge fans. We really do enjoy his art.
I'm excited for the next White Knight installation.
Yeah, I am as well, and I'm on board. And as I said earlier, let's get that Hickman, Sean Gordon Murphy image series. I'd like to see the I'm going to deem him the sort of master of ideas and high concepts. Come up with something really crazy and put that out for Sean to draw.
That would be so awesome.
Yeah. All right, so that was our spotlight number 2. That was on Sean Gordon Murphy. We'll be back soon with another one. And if you enjoyed this video, you can please subscribe to our YouTube channel, which is Constructing Comics. We also do a podcast under the same name, Constructing Comics. You can find that on SoundCloud or YouTube. We're on Twitter. The Twitter address is up there. It's at Constructing Com Pod. I'm sorry, Construct Com Pod. There's no ing there. There's our Instagram at Constructing Comics Pod, and there's our Facebook address, which is facebook.com/Constructing Comics. And I'd like to thank everybody, and we'll be back very soon with another Creator Spotlight.
Thank you.
Yep. Thanks.